difficulty that we face is sometimes the number of middlemen that will get involved without you knowing. You may have done your diligence on your chosen preferred partner, but behind that, the local representative of that firm might actually, as you just say, decide otherwise and say that actually there's some good business for my cousin so-and-so who happens to be the local party chief or whatever.
Right.
I mean, how far can you go to investigate, or is there in fact any confidence you can have or any support you can gain from a local authority, be it, for example, your own country's consulate or the local country's authorities, to help you and to maybe to track down, and is there the will to do so locally?
I think the due diligence can usually tell you pretty well whether the people you're dealing with have a good track record of doing what you want them to do, and whether they've got the right sort of business structure and the right sort of relationships. One of the mistakes that people commonly make with due diligence is that they do the investigation, put the report on the side, and never look at it again. You actually have to monitor what people are doing in the marketplace. Otherwise, as you say, anything can happen, and you only become aware of it at a very late stage. But generally what you find is that if somebody is going to be dishonest, commit a fraud, whatever, the chances of them doing it with you and it being the first time they've ever done it are relatively small. You'd be very unlucky if your deal with somebody is the first time they've ever done anything dishonest. Mm-hmm. So the idea of the due diligence is really to look at somebody's history and use all those resources to talk to former colleagues, look at what they've done in former jobs, all these sorts of things, look at the reputation, and it gives you a pretty good indication. But you do have to monitor what's happening afterwards.
But the other part of the question is, will the local authorities provide some form of assistance, or is there a place you can, if you see that something's going wrong, are you going to be the one who will get all the blame, or can you actually put your hands up somewhere saying, hey, this is the security breach that I've noticed, can we do something?
Yeah, you have to monitor it, and a lot of these cases that do come to light are a result of whistleblowers. So that's either a company putting up its own hand and saying, okay, something's happened, we're going to fess up to it, and let's make it right. But even that's not a simple thing to do. There is obviously consular assistance for you if you are a foreign national, but if you've localized your management and they are Chinese, there is no consular assistance for the individuals. You might find that the consulate or the embassy can help you as a British business. The British embassy will be able to help you. And I've personally used the British embassy and the consulates up to ministerial level and ministerial dialogue with China to resolve intractable legal issues of one sort or another, and quite effectively. So you definitely can use it. But what you need to do, you need to set up your crisis plan as part of your business plan. So it's no good picking up the phone on first thing Monday morning and saying, is there somebody I can speak to at the consulate? Because you've been doing the business for 3 years, suddenly it's all gone wrong. You need to develop those relationships so you know who to call, they know what you're doing, who's involved, and they can actually help you. Otherwise, it just takes too long for people to work out what's happened.
Just to add to that, the Chinese government have had a track record of being very conciliatory to Western businesses who have raised issues like, look, we found out these problems, can you help us? Just to give a case, an example of something in the past, back in the late 80s when McDonald's and KFC entered China. For those of you who don't know, China is the only country in the world where there are actually more KFCs than McDonald's. KFC is actually the market leader, and McDonald's is close second. When they both entered China, they both set up their stores in Beijing, just off Tiananmen Square, which were the most successful franchises that they had anywhere in the world. Chinese government then found issues with the land and asked them to move. McDonald's thought, no, we have a contract, we're going to fight this. And KFC decided, no, okay, let's work with the government on this. We can fight it, but there's no point arguing it with the Chinese government. As a result of that, McDonald's lost out in mainland China, and KFC, working with the government, were able to move forward and overtake their competition.
So we talk a lot about legal protections in China, but the fact that there is political rule of law. So there is a legal system that does give you redress in many cases, but the courts answer to the party. So you do have to be very aware of what it is you're trying to achieve. Foreign companies are getting much better enforcement in things like IPR and other issues than they used to, but you do have to approach it with Chinese characteristics. You have to communicate not only through the lawyers but also through other channels. There are all these sorts of things you need to take into account. And the law might not always save you. I mean, one of the cases I look at in the book is the case of Mark Kitto, who was lauded in the Financial Times a few years ago as being China's first foreign media mogul. He beat Murdoch and the FT and everybody else to setting up a publishing joint venture, which is in the prohibited list of Chinese investment. But he did it by partnering with a government entity, which is very, very powerful, which is basically the regulating authority, and said, well, we'll let ourselves have this joint venture. It all fell apart, and he was left scratching his head and moving off to run a very nice guest house in the hills outside Shanghai. But he still owned the trademark and felt that was his trump card. But actually, it proved very, very difficult to enforce his trademark rights against such a powerful entity in China. There are lots of cases where people have had difficulty in enforcing their legal rights for one reason or another. And there's a case in Hainan at the moment where there's a joint venture between a British real estate developer and China Resources, which is a state-owned company, where there are allegations that the company chops, another local China issue, you've got a chop as well as a signature, were taken from the joint venture. The land was then sold using the stolen chops to a subsidiary of the joint venture partner. Now, the local courts seem quite friendly with the local partner, so there's a long process of dealing with the embassy and the consulates and the courts. It's not as simple as it might be in some other markets, but usually there is a way to find a resolution.
I think if there is any more questions, if not, okay, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Jeremy, for joining us today. Just to remind you all, his book is out in September, and I do early recommend you getting yourselves a copy. If you would like to take those up on Palgrave's generous offer, please come see me afterwards. Now, in the meantime, we'd like to ask you to join us for some more drinks. Unfortunately, we don't have access to the terrace thanks to seagulls, but I hope our foyer is just as enjoyable. All right, thank you.
Thanks.